Hello everyone, and welcome to the silent film version of the Scholastic Book Club of the Golden Silent Films podcast, where we will be examining the life of a Hollywood superstar in book form. This is one of the wildest stories never told. Until now, that is. Author Sherri Snyder will be joining us later in the show to tell us that story, so stay tuned. Before we dive into this literary adventure, let's talk about the various Golden Silent Films podcast social media outlets. As usual, head on over to Golden Silence Cast on Instagram and Blue Sky for up-to-date info on this little podcast. And for all of you folks on X or Twitter out there, just follow at Golden Silence 1 or just search Golden Silence Cast and we should pop up. All of those screen names and sites will be in the episode description in case you're interested in checking us out. As always, we always want to have you on board with us at these social spaces. You're going to get behind-the-scenes pics and info, upcoming episode reveals, and other fun film-related materials. And don't forget the fun photos of our well-read podcasts, Soda and Gizmo. Also, if you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or Amazon Music, or anywhere that allows it, please leave comments, reviews, ratings, or all of the above. Our show has only been around for 6 years now, and we've only received 20 reviews on iTunes. We would love to see that number grow in 2026, and you awesome silent film fans out there can definitely make it happen. All of those ratings and reviews help so much. So live your best review-leaving life and help our show grow a little and reach fellow silent film fans. Dropping those reviews gives us more exposure in the world of podcasts, and it lets us know how we can improve the show. As always, we are grateful for all of the feedback and always want to bring you the best show humanly possible. And please subscribe to the Golden Silent Films podcast. While our output can be sketchy and irregular, if you are subscribed, you're never going to miss an episode, and the moment new content drops, it's going to go straight to your listening device of choice. We are starting off our 6th season here and don't want you to miss a second. So you know the magic words: like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. Before we get too deep into the episode, we want to start off with a little backstory. So first off, let's talk about this particular episode. Its release on January 30th, 2026, or maybe January 29th, depending where you are. 2026 is very specific and calculated. You see, Rudolph Valentino isn't the only silent film star to have passed away 100 years ago. He shares a death centennial with Barbara La Marr, who shuffled off this mortal coil on January 30th, 1926. Oddly enough, that's not the only parallel between the two superstars. Now, the genesis of this episode is the perfect example of why we love making this podcast so much. While I can't remember exactly what started it, I came across the life of Barbara La Marr totally by accident. I can't even count how many episodes of this show came into existence as a result of a Wikipedia wormhole. I find myself digging around the online encyclopedia for one reason, only to become totally enamored by some hidden gem buried deep in the bowels of the internet. While I can't remember what initial search led me to Barbara, I distinctly remember being instantly hooked on her story the moment I laid eyes on it. It was a biography that I couldn't ignore. Her name and life were 0% on my silent film radar. I read that online article over and over and over. It was fascinating. How could someone with such a wild and tragic life story be so unknown in the mainstream world? So, Wikipedia was my launchpad into the life of Barbara La Marr. After that, I was zipping around cyberspace, absorbing all of the La Marr tidbits I could find. As I dug into this story, I completely left the episode I was currently working on behind. That is a common occurrence here at the home office. We have the attention span of goldfish here, it seems. Some new, shiny topic pops up and consumes me and my crack research staff. Such is life at the Golden Silent Films podcast. With my episode schedule all jacked up as a result of this wonderful detour, I felt I had to continue down this intellectual road. This newfound commitment to spreading the word of Barbara La Marr and her wild and crazy life was my new cause. My continued digging into the life of the short-lived superstar eventually led me to this episode's guest, Sherri Snyder. I was so intrigued by this story that I reached out to Sherri. As a host of a small, lesser-known podcast, I always appreciate it when cool people who do really cool stuff want to share their time and participation and perspectives here on the Golden Silent Films podcast. Sherri Snyder could not have been more charming and helpful to the show. In talking with her over the phone, I could tell instantly how much she cared for the legacy of Barbara. The really cool thing about Sherri Snyder is how connected she is to Barbara La Marr. She's not just a mere author and teller of life stories. I came across her in her book, Barbara La Marr, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood, and saw it had potential to be a great resource. At the time, I wasn't quite aware how connected she was to that world of Barbara La Marr. My mind was blown the first time I checked out her website. When you fire up your local internet machine next, head on over to www.sherrisnyder.net, and you will also have your mind blown, I'm sure. There is so much cool stuff to check out and learn about both Sherri and Barbara. This was how I first learned that she actually portrayed the talented actress. Talk about immersion into a subject. I've chatted with a fair number of authors, but never have I ever had the pleasure of talking to an author who portrayed their written subject. What a cool set of circumstances to learn about one of the biggest stars of the silent era. So let's talk about that book first, since that's why we are all here today. Again, it's called Barbara La Marr, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood, and was put out by University Press of Kentucky. It's a great historical read, super worthy of your time and money. On that note, this book is available on Amazon.com if you are so inclined. The life of Barbara La Marr is very underrated and unknown to many corners of the silent film world. That is a real shame, but thanks to Sherri Snyder, hopefully that is something that will soon change. We are mere moments away from chatting in person with author Sherri Snyder about the life of Barbara La Marr, but before that, I wanted to talk a little bit about my favorite parts of the book and why the story of Barbara La Marr is worth your valuable reading time. Having set the stage for this book club discussion of this fantastic biography, I want to take you fine listeners through some of the parts that really captured my imagination. I'm not going to go too crazy here, though. I don't want to steal Sherri's thunder, but there are a few bits that really spoke to me personally as a reader and lover of silent film, and that I think would appeal to you fine listeners out there. First, let's start with the subtitle, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood. When we talk to Sherri, she'll tell us more about that moniker, but there is no denying the beauty of Barbara La Marr. In an issue of Photoplay magazine from 1924, we see a picture of Barbara looking into a mirror, and we get the caption, Barbara La Marr, glancing into her mirrored eyes, must glimpse something of her own magnetism. The appeal of the eternal feminine is in her faintest smile, and her every gesture is a thing of latent poetry. In this drab setting, she is like a flame. You cannot say enough about the charisma, the X factor, the magic of Barbara La Marr. To see her, she is incredibly attractive. There's no doubt there is the way it is. But she also exudes this magic, this magnetism, like the caption said. She is actually more X factor, I think, than human. And that's one thing you learn through reading the book is just how much people thought she was beautiful. Their feelings towards her, people were just enamored with her. And I think that's like nothing I've really ever seen before of one person, and especially for someone who I had never heard of before. To hear someone so charismatic that was just completely unknown to me is really something interesting. And you learn about that in the book. Now, if you don't know, in a little backstory on myself, I'm a child of the Imperial Valley of California. I live in and represent Pittsburgh, of course, but my roots are in the extreme Southern California region. Imagine my surprise when the small desert town of El Centro plays a part in the life story of Barbara La Marr. As a child, a wild and crazy bit of her story would happen when her family relocated to El Centro. Later in our chat with Sherri Snyder, we will talk about this crazy story. I definitely don't want to spoil anything yet, but needless to say, I really loved seeing my birth town make a cameo in the story amongst some family turmoil for young Barbara, or Retha as she was known back then. While this is a Barbara La Marr-centric episode, we cannot ignore the similarities between the life of Barbara and Rudolph Valentino. I'll keep this short and sweet as to not derail the true star of this episode, though. There was just so much stuff that jumped out to me as I read this great book. Obviously, there is the death angle that really ties the two stars together. Both passed away tragically in 1926, and their deaths both caused an incredible amount of hysteria amongst the public. The two movie stars also shared a similar childhood. Both found new and inventive ways to cause trouble and worry for their parents. While young Rudolfo never caused legal authorities to intervene, the same could not be said about young Retha Dale Watson, later known to the world as Barbara La Marr. It was fascinating to see these two seemingly normal young lives lead and grow and move into a world of trouble and at best aimlessness, only to turn those years into successful lives on the biggest screens in the world. Sherri Snyder does an incredible job here bringing the life of Barbara La Marr to life on the page. I was on the edge of my seat as I traveled from page to page, from story to story, from year to year. From an alleged possible potential kidnapping to marriages both real and unreal, Snyder paints a portrait of a girl undeterred by life's most unexpected trials and tribulations. Like Valentino across the Atlantic, La Marr showed incredible strength in always pushing forward. Whatever roadblocks were placed in front of her, La Marr overcame them with flair and a certain cult of personality that would later prove vital to her cinematic career. This quality of never-ending persistence was super enjoyable to read about and was a bit of an inspiration. Another parallel betwixt the two came on the dance floors across the United States. Barbara La Marr, in her late teens, would take her talent and ambition to the world of dance. It was a wild adventure of ups and downs for Barbara La Marr and her dance partner Robert Carville. So many subsections of Barbara La Marr's life could make great movies in and of themselves. This era of traveling and dancing certainly fits that bill as well. Since we've already crossed streams once in this episode, let's do it again and talk about The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful and the original Latin Lover. That begs the question, did the two stars, Barbara and Rudolph, ever cross paths? They sure did, and of course, it involved dance. Snyder writes, Barbara and Robert's Castles in the Air performances were attended by Rudolph Valentino, one of Broadway's most sought-after dancers. Enraptured by Barbara, Valentino confided to Robert what an extraordinary dancer he thought she was, and that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Valentino also mentioned his intention to get into films and encouraged him and Barbara to do likewise. That all brings us to the cinematic part of this story, and I loved reading about her films, which were completely unknown to me. I was pretty late in the game to catching The White Moth, a Barbara La Marr picture from 1924. This film is a perfect representation of what La Marr brings to her performances. I loved this film so much, and it is a must-watch for all of you out there. Barbara La Marr really brings the work of Georgia Hale to mind. La Marr brings a rough edge to her characters, which makes them so much more intriguing, so much more interesting to see how they play out as the story goes along. It was so much fun watching the vamp work her magic as a Parisian dancer. In Snyder's book, there is a great section about the filming of The White Moth and some of the trials and tribulations and injuries Barbara faced during its production. Another great bit that is brought up during this section is where was the magic and charisma that Barbara La Marr radiated. Snyder digs through memoirs and publications of the day to bring us the thoughts of her White Moth co-star Ben Lyon, who played Douglas Morley in the film. According to Snyder, Lyon would one day concede that he did more than act in The White Moth with Barbara. I fell in love, he admitted in his memoir. A photoplay article purportedly written by him alludes to why, describing his priceless and never-to-be-forgotten experience of being vamped by her for on-screen purposes. Snyder continues relating Lyon's thoughts. No woman, he supposedly relates in the article, can be, within one body and one mind, the things that Barbara is. There is intoxication in every line of her, every sound of her voice. The article further states that he found the scent of her hair, her soft skin, and her sheer, overpowering tender sweetness irresistible. Said to be intrigued by her exceptional mind, he allegedly nonetheless remarks, "A man does not think when he is with Barbara. He can only feel, until sanity and he become strangers." Whether that is legit Ben Lyons or the work of an imaginative magazine writer, you still see the aura that surrounded Barbara, and that level of intensity is wild yet super cool. While we're on the topic of The White Moth, I really loved it as a great introduction to the wonderful works of Barbara La Marr. It was such a fun yet tense film and was the perfect vehicle for Barbara. The White Moth was directed by Maurice Tournier and was released in May of 1924. The vamp starred opposite Conway Turley and Charles de Roquefort. This film tells the story of a love rhombus, maybe a love polygon. There is definitely a lot of love-shaped scandal going on and deception behind the scenes of a dance troupe in Paris, with Barbara being the titular White Moth. There are so many great angles to talk about with this film. From the direction to the story and the visuals, it all hit perfectly. I couldn't believe I'd never heard of this movie before. It's a dramatic tour de force featuring multiple awesome performances, and the chemistry between La Marr and Turley was on point, and I could feel every high and low of their relationship. It was incredible to experience, and I cannot recommend this film enough. So, if need be, please pause this podcast now, load up the film on YouTube, and come back and hit play to learn more about the star of the film, Barbara La Marr. It's a movie totally worth its own episode, and maybe, hopefully, if we're lucky, we can have the wonderful Sherri Snyder come back and talk more about the White Moth in a later episode. Another bright spot of this book is the pictures it includes. Sherri Snyder paints incredibly vivid pictures with her words, but there is a special magic in catching visual glimpses into the life of Barbara La Marr. I may sound like a dunce, but I love when books like this include photos and other visual aids. It helps make the world come alive, and Snyder handles that perfectly. One of my favorite pictures in the book is a simple one on the surface, but it was really touching. The book is chock full, sure, of behind-the-scenes photos and glamour shots, but I loved the photo of Barbara holding her son on page 215. It was such a touching photo and showed Barbara in a more relatable and emotional situation amongst the wild and crazy stories her life consisted of. It was really great and still remains with me long after reading the book. Now, the reading experience really is elevated when the reader can put faces and visuals to the stories being told in the book. Barbara La Marr was so much more than just an actress. Sherri Snyder does great work in bringing La Marr's other passions and talents to life. We already talked about the dancing, but I didn't fully realize the impact the actress had behind the camera. Reading about her writing exploits was quite a surprise and totally unknown and not unexpected to me. I loved how Sherri took us through Barbara's growth as a writer and how that phase of her life dovetailed perfectly into her career as an actress. I always love hearing stories of the women who really shaped the movie world from behind the camera. Another aspect of this book I loved and appreciated was how Sherri worked to correct the negative stories and baggage that the life of Barbara La Marr had accumulated over the short time she lived in this world. There were many a nasty rumor and innuendo hurled at Barbara, and luckily for readers everywhere, Sherri Snyder takes that gossip and sets the record straight. As more and more years pass, the scandalous and spiciest stories tend to be the ones that live the longest. So kudos and thank you to Sherri for correcting the narrative when possible. So, with my thoughts properly recorded and my favorite parts discussed, let's get to the true highlight of this episode and talk with Sherri Snyder herself. Sherri, thank you so much for stopping by the Golden Silent Films podcast to talk about Barbara La Marr and your experiences documenting and portraying her life. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how that ultimately led you to telling the story of the girl who was too beautiful for Hollywood.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a Los Angeles-based actress. I have a degree in theater acting, and I'm also a writer. I have a deep, long-standing appreciation for the beauty and glamour epitomized by Hollywood's golden age, and like you, I have a fondness for history. I've always been drawn to period pieces as an actress, and those are the types of roles I'm typically cast in. I enjoy examining humanity through the context of the different societal and psychological influences that govern past eras. I love bringing past eras and the people who inhabited those eras to life. I discovered Barbara when my good friend, Carrie Bible, she's a tour guide at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, where Barbara is interred, contacted me about portraying Barbara in a stage production, Channeling Hollywood. Channeling Hollywood was a collaboration between the Pasadena Playhouse and Pasadena Museum of History that centered on 5 famous historical figures who had a connection to Pasadena, California. Since Barbara died in Altadena, a nearby community, and the producers were intrigued by her story, she had been included in the mix of characters. The producers were seeking 5 actors to not only portray these people, but research them and write their respective life stories in monologue form. The 5 monologues would then comprise the play. Carrie told me she'd passed my name along to the producers. Well, one of the producers contacted me and asked me to audition. I quickly wrote my audition piece and I won the part. Barbara's only child, her son, Donald Gallery, was living in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. He and his wife had retired there, and he traveled up to California to see me in the play. After winning the role, I had immersed myself in Barbara's story, and I'd spoken to Don on the phone, and I'll never forget seeing him in person for the first time. He attended the play's final show. It was a sold out show, but I recognized him instantly during my performance. He was in the front row, dead center, wiping tears from his eyes. He told his wife when he returned home that I had brought Barbara back to life for him. He was only 3 years old when Barbara died in 1926. He was subsequently adopted and raised by actor Zazu Pitts, a very good friend of Barbara's. It was his dream to have Barbara's story told. He told me not long after seeing my Channeling Hollywood performance that he believed I was the person to tell her story, and he asked me to author her biography. From the time I'd started researching Barbara, I'd been deeply inspired by her story, despite its tragic elements, and I'd sensed that she'd been misunderstood, as several of her close friends, including Zazu Pitts, pointed out. So I wholeheartedly agreed to write her biography. It's Barbara La Marr, the girl who was too beautiful for Hollywood. I was also encouraged to enlarge the monologue I wrote for the Channeling Hollywood production into a longer one woman show about Barbara's life. Since the book was published, I've regularly presented a Barbara La Marr program in various venues all over Southern California and beyond, including at Hollywood's Egyptian Theater, the Hollywood Heritage Museum, the Old Town Music Hall in El Segundo, and other places. I also perform it each October at Hollywood Forever. As I mentioned, that's where Barbara is interred. My Hollywood Forever performance is part of the Art Deco Society of Los Angeles annual Hollywood Forever tour. The tour spotlights various old Hollywood luminaries and Los Angeles pioneers at Hollywood Forever, but the Barbara La Marr programs I do in the other venues throughout the year consist of my one woman performance as Barbara and, after I come out of character, my slideshow lecture about her life. Telling Barbara's story has been one of my life's greatest joys, hands down. I consider it an honor.
The childhood and teen years of Barbara were especially fascinating. To be honest, if she never did anything as an adult, a book about her youth would be incredibly interesting and make for an amazing movie itself. Take us through the turbulent early years and how they made her the woman she would become and the star she would become.
She indeed had quite a life from beginning to end, it's true. A few years after her death in 1926, her publicist stated, "There was no reason to lie about Barbara La Marr. Everything she said, everything she did was colored with news value." And newspapers of the day described her life story as a wilder story than she ever helped to film. Her beginnings, however, were humble. She was born Retha Watson on July 28, 1896, in Yakima, Washington. She was the daughter of Rose Watson, a homemaker and seamstress, and William Watson, who was at different times a reporter, a newspaper editor, a proprietor of different newspapers, and an irrigationist. As an adult, Retha would say that she was the biological child of various persons of illustrious standing. She changed her story at times, and she said she was born in Virginia. She liked to think of herself as a Southern belle. She had a highly active imagination. Her father's career as a newspaperman profoundly affected her childhood. Her father openly admitted, "The newspaper business is not a dream. Too frequently, it is a haunting nightmare from a business standpoint." Retha, when thinking back on her childhood as an adult, would recollect that her father would move to some small town, start up a newspaper, boom it, develop it, and then sell it and move on to another town. As a result, the family moved around continually throughout the Pacific Northwest and eventually to California. According to Retha, Until her teen years, the family never resided at the same residence for more than a year. She furthermore spoke in adulthood of living with her family in cheap, dilapidated boarding rooms as a child. She mentioned the coarse cotton clothes she wore, and she recalled laboring as a typesetter on her father's newspapers and earning 30 cents per column. Retha dreamed of more. She later acknowledged that she was an incurable dreamer. She would also remember that she was, as she said, starved for beauty when she was growing up. From a young age, she had what her mother described as an unusually romantic nature. In other words, she was very fanciful. At the same time, her convent education and her father fueled her keen, burgeoning intellect. She spoke fondly as an adult of her father's large collection of books and how he frequently read to the family in the evenings. My meals weren't meals, she would say of her girlhood. They were lessons in English. Being the dreamer she was, she often sought solace in her own world. She had a self professed voracious appetite for reading. Her aptitude for writing surfaced at a young age. She loved inventing little stories and composing poems, and a yearning to act also took hold of her. She sometimes entertained her family and the neighborhood children with her little stories and by enacting her own plays. She began formulating specific career goals at this point. She was very driven, even then. She had multiple aspirations, and I know we'll be discussing her career trajectory and how it led to her becoming a renowned silent screen star in adulthood shortly. So I won't go into it here, except to say that, above all, little Retha dreamed of being a great actress. In her teen years, she found fame and notoriety in unexpected ways. Her first brush with notoriety occurred in 1913 when she was 16. She was living with her parents in an apartment in Los Angeles. Her sudden, mysterious disappearance from the apartment prompted her terrified father to race to the police and charge her 32-year-old half-sister and her half-sister's married lover with abducting her. Her half-sister had been estranged from the family because Retha's parents feared her influence on Retha, but she had been in the apartment and had spoken with Retha right before Retha disappeared. The kidnapping accusation spawned a massive manhunt, an eruption of headlines in multiple states, and an outpouring of public concern. The headlines continued when Retha reappeared as mysteriously as she had vanished, when her accused kidnappers later surrendered, and throughout the preliminary court hearing. Curiously, testimonies given during the hearing suggest that rather than being kidnapped, Retha was evidently attempting to escape parental authority. Her headstrong nature, impulsiveness, and developing rebelliousness often put her at odds with her overly protective parents, and testimonies revealed that she clashed frequently with them. Among other things, her father didn't approve of her film acting aspirations at this time, and she had run away from home a few months earlier. Ultimately, the judge dismissed the case, citing lack of evidence against the alleged kidnappers. The press dubbed the case one of the most bizarre episodes ever recounted. Retha gained a certain notoriety and suffered from nervous strain in the wake of it, so much so that her parents took her out of Los Angeles. They moved to El Centro, a small, remote town in the southeastern California desert. On a lighter note, in addition to acquiring notoriety due to the kidnapping incident, Retha had garnered a reputation as a beauty. Many photos of her had appeared in the papers while the press reported on the kidnapping incident, and after she had reappeared and before she moved with her parents to El Centro, one of the Los Angeles newspapers posed the question of whether the Retha Watson kidnapping case had revealed a new world beauty. A local painter and self-proclaimed priest of beauty decided to meet with Retha to see for himself. He went on to rave about her beauty to the press, declaring her the closest thing to physical perfection he had ever encountered. The press subsequently pronounced Retha California's Venus. Retha would soon earn another title. She didn't remain in El Centro very long. Beguiled by, in her words, bright lights and thrills, she returned to Los Angeles, alone and against her parents' wishes. Reports of her activities in Los Angeles soon reached her parents in El Centro. Despite being 17 and underage, she managed to enter the nightclubs night after night. She was a celebrated beauty in the clubs and an exceptional dancer. Her parents also discovered that she was associating with shady men, and per Retha's own admission as an adult, she was drinking and engaging in, as she put it, other mad escapades. Her father, fearing for her safety, implored Los Angeles juvenile officers to bring her back to him. The officers investigated and discovered that she was constantly pursued by men. The chief officer, declaring her dangerously beautiful, forced her, under threat of arrest and imprisonment in an institution, to return to her parents in El Centro. Given Retha's growing popularity, reports of this incident circulated around the country, appearing beneath such headlines as "Too Beautiful for City, Girl Sent to Country for Safety." She became known as the Too Beautiful Girl, and that Too Beautiful moniker would follow her for all time, throughout her career and to this day. To clarify, my book, as I mentioned, is titled Barbara La Marr, the Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood, but the "for Hollywood" bit was never part of her moniker. My publisher added those words to provide a little context before the book was published. Though Retha went back to El Centro when ordered to do so, she soon returned to Los Angeles again. Since she was still 17 and therefore prohibited by juvenile authorities from living alone in Los Angeles, she had somehow persuaded her parents to return with her. She also returned to the headlines. No less determined to escape parental authority and the juvenile authorities who were keeping tabs on her, she began staying at older friends' homes and, according to one of those friends, looking for a man to marry. Under California law at the time, girls were bound by parental authority until they were 18, unless they were married. Evidently, this wasn't the first time Retha had used marriage as a means to live on her own. The first time she'd left El Centro and returned to Los Angeles alone, she had announced that she had been kidnapped again, this time, according to her, by a man who was desperate to marry her. She'd said she had married him, but was soon widowed. That, however, is a whole other story. Months shy of her 18th birthday, Retha married Lawrence Converse, a garage manager she'd met at a party and barely knew. She was unaware, she later said, that he was already married and a father. Converse, charged with bigamy, declared that he had no memory of marrying Retha. Doctors believed that his irrational behavior resulted from complications from a severe head injury he'd suffered years earlier. During the sensationalized court proceedings, his attorney insisted to a reporter that Converse had, quote, looked too long at the beautiful face of Miss Retha Watson and was in no condition to withstand her allurements. Retha was again blamed when the operation intended to remedy Converse's condition resulted in his death. The press pronounced her an enchantress of fatal beauty. The film acting career she had aspired to and been working toward was derailed when the film studios, denouncing her so-called lurid escapades, barred her from appearing in their films. Incredibly, Retha wasn't about to give up. She had told a reporter before Lawrence's death that she alone determined her fate. In the aftermath of his death, though, she was unable to remain in Los Angeles and soon left. Before leaving, she nonetheless vowed to a friend that she would one day return to Los Angeles and become a film star.
Barbara took a winding road to movie stardom, from stage to dancing to writing. She did it all, really. How did those early gigs pave the way for her ascent to the silver screen?
As I said, she discovered her passions, her talents, namely acting and writing, early on in her life. She had certain career aspirations. She knew what she wanted, and she was very determined. When she was 8 years old in 1905, she attended a play staged by the Allen Stock Company in Tacoma, Washington, was deeply inspired by it, and told her parents that she wanted to go on the stage. Her childhood dream was, she would later say, to be a great tragedienne and wield a dagger. According to her father, she participated in one of the Allen Stock Company's amateur showcases. She recited a dramatic poem and was so well received by the audience that the company offered her a role in one of their plays. She was soon given a position with the company for the summer, and the company invited her to remain with them the following summer. It was quite an achievement. The Allen Stock Company was a prominent, critically acclaimed company, and Retha held her own alongside the company's seasoned, esteemed members. As she moved from city to city, state to state with her family, she continued performing successfully with other stock theater companies. Local newspapers commended her performances as brilliant and clever. One critic noted that her acting received round after round of applause after at least one performance. But alas, it didn't last. Around the time that she entered her preteen years, she outgrew children's parts, but was still too young to play adults. A stock theater manager advised her to give up stock theater acting for a few years. Initially disheartened, Retha soon dreamed a new dream: film stardom. She beseeched her parents to allow her to journey to Los Angeles for a chance to break into motion pictures. Her pleas were initially met with pretty strong resistance. Her father opposed her career choice at first. The film industry was still in its infancy, and he might have considered film acting to be an unstable or even disreputable occupation. Retha persisted, though, and eventually won out. At age 14, after quitting school for good and working for a while in a candy shop, she traveled with her mother from Fresno, California, where they resided at the time, to Los Angeles. The going in Los Angeles, however, was tougher than she'd imagined. One story holds that the rudimentary cameras of the day were unable to register her blossoming beauty. According to other accounts, she was purportedly fired after rejecting the advances of a certain director. She was shoved into low-paying extra roles. She nevertheless remained in Los Angeles, other than her brief stints in El Centro, and kept trying. That is, up until the time that the film studios, fearful of incurring the wrath of the censorship board following her bigamous, scandalous marriage to Lawrence Converse, barred her from their films. Her reputation in tatters and her film acting career thwarted, Retha, now 18 and needing to earn a living, left Los Angeles for San Francisco, seeking a fresh start. San Francisco was preparing to host the 1915 World's Fair, a spectacular event that featured a vast array of, among other things, top-of-the-line entertainment. The city's theaters and cabarets prepared for the millions of people who would attend the fair by hiring entertainers. Performers from around the globe flocked to San Francisco to perform at the fair and the surrounding venues. Drawing upon her natural dancing talent, Retha set her sights on becoming a famous dancer and formed a dance partnership as well as began a romance with ballroom dancer Robert Carville. One of her first orders of business was to reinvent herself. With Robert's help, she honed her dancing skills and adopted the name Barbara La Marr, effectively disassociating from her scandalous past. Barbara achieved renown in San Francisco, and with the pre World War I dance craze in full swing, some of the nation's foremost cabarets, including on Broadway. Besides classic waltzes and other paired performances with Robert Carville and later dancer Philip Ainsworth during their brief tumultuous marriage in 1916, Barbara performed impassioned, interpretive, barefoot solo dances she choreographed herself, very much in the spirit of Isadora Duncan. Believe it or not, barefoot dancing was considered relatively racy then, and Barbara's barefoot solo dancing reportedly ignited somewhat of a craze on the West Coast. Though Barbara and Robert reconciled and continued dancing together after Barbara left Philip Ainsworth, they parted ways a few months later in 1917 when the United States entered World War I. Robert was one of the few men to enlist before the draft went into effect. As before, Barbara forged ahead on her own. She encountered Ben Dealey, an incredibly talented comedian, songwriter, singer, vaudeville headliner, and film actor at a Los Angeles party the summer of 1917. As it happened, the female component of his vaudeville act had left the act. Ben asked Barbara to replace her. Barbara happily agreed, and she performed with him on the vaudeville circuits throughout the country, earning praise from critics and ultimately equal billing with him. She ended up with a new husband as well. She and Ben married the following year. It was said that Ben, being the veteran performer that he was, helped Barbara while they performed together, refining her stage presence, assisting her with her comedic timing, and helping her cultivate a character type that came naturally to her, a sultry, exotic type. Aside from acting and dancing in Ben's vaudeville act, Barbara continued performing her interpretive dance numbers as a dance soloist until her vaudeville career and her dancing career came to an abrupt halt in 1919. Her health had been unstable, off and on, for a few years. She had a somewhat fragile constitution, and she'd also suffered dancing injuries. She said that her body could no longer stand the strain of dancing. It was a difficult period for her. She considered dance to be, in her own words, the most perfect form of expression, and she loved the freedom she felt when she danced. Nevertheless, she took her doctor's advice. She gave up dancing as a career and returned to the warm California sunshine. Still under the guise of her fictitious identity, Barbara returned to the city that had cast her out, Los Angeles. Not long after her return, she surrendered to, as she put it, an instinctive desire to write. She wrote her first full-length story and, undaunted by her lack of experience, submitted it to the Goldwyn studio. She was saddened to receive a rejection letter in response. It appeared to her that the studio hadn't bothered to read her manuscript, but she kept believing in her story. Ben Dealey, still her husband at that time, was working as a film actor with the Fox Film Corporation, and he might have had a hand in getting Fox studio executives to read her story. The studio loved the story so much they bought it for the modern equivalent of over $20,000, and they awarded Barbara a contract beginning in January 1920 and worth over $150,000 today to write 5 more stories. She was 23 years old. Her stories appeared on film screens around the world. The films were silent films, of course, and silent films feature intertitles. Since writing intertitles was a highly specialized job, a separate writer usually wrote them, but Fox entrusted Barbara with writing intertitles for her films and some of the studio's other films. One might wonder why the Fox Film Corporation offered Barbara a contract, given her lack of writing experience. Studios had been discouraging all but consummate professionals from submitting manuscripts, yet clearly Fox saw something special in Barbara. What she lacked in professional experience, she made up for with staggering life experience and faith in her abilities. When she announced her decision to pursue a writing career to her father before she was hired by Fox, she told him, "Just watch me do it." Often throughout the years, Barbara likewise funneled her manifold life experiences and the emotions they stirred in her into poetry. And she even authored the scripts for some of the films in which she appeared as a film star. While Barbara was still under contract as a writer with Fox in 1920, her striking beauty and enchanting presence caught the eye of film producers. She was persuaded to begin appearing in films. One of Barbara's significant breaks came when her friend, actress Marguerite de la Motte, leading lady in The Mark of Zorro, invited her to accompany her to work on the set of that film one day. Barbara was feeling a little burnt out by writing, and so she decided to go. On the film set, Barbara was introduced to the film's star, one of the era's most revered stars, Douglas Fairbanks Sr. She later recalled of that day that she sensed Fairbanks was, as she put it, sizing me up. Her instincts were spot on. Fairbanks soon offered her a screen test. Barbara suppressed her nervousness, went through with it, and won a supporting role as a feisty gangster's moll in Fairbanks's next film, The Nut, a romantic comedy. Though the part was small, critics took note of Barbara, stating that her seductive charms add considerably to the picture, and her work is equally commendable alongside a distinguished cast. Fairbanks next offered Barbara the highly coveted role of the menacing spy, Milady de Winter, in his epic production, The Three Musketeers, a film predicted from the start to be an international sensation. Barbara, still hiding behind her assumed identity and fearful of being recognized as the notorious Retha Watson in a significant role in a major motion picture, nonetheless accepted the offer. But her spirits dampened during filming when people close to her, including Ben Dealey, still her husband then, denounced her decision to pursue film acting. Some of them believed that she could achieve more if she stuck with writing. She was so discouraged she nearly quit the picture. Fairbanks and Fred Niblo, the film's director, on the other hand, believed in and encouraged her. Barbara would later say that one of her proudest moments occurred when Fairbanks, after viewing some of the film's unedited footage one day, told her, "You are going to be one of the biggest girls on the screen. Wait and see." As anticipated, The Three Musketeers was a box office smash when it hit theaters in 1921. People literally fought their way to box office windows, and house records were shattered worldwide. Critics saluted the film as a thrilling, gripping, unadulterated success and the greatest achievement since the birth of the motion picture industry. Barbara received her share of the praise. She was hailed as fiery, dazzling, and deserving of stardom. She would later credit the encouragement she received from Douglas Fairbanks during the making of The Three Musketeers with bolstering her determination to succeed as a film actress. The Three Musketeers marked the end of Barbara's time in the shadows of obscurity as an actress. She managed to evade association with her turbulent, scandalous past for a while, long enough to ascend to stardom and, as Fairbanks had foreseen, reign as one of the silent screen's leading actresses. Another significant career break that facilitated Barbara's rise to stardom occurred when Rex Ingram, one of Hollywood's most successful directors at the time, called her in to audition for him. It was later said that it was her walk that initially caught Ingram's eye. She seemed to him to flow as she moved, and he recognized that she was a dancer. He'd been searching for the perfect villainess, an evil temptress who plays men like pawns, for a film he'd written and would direct. The film was ultimately titled Trifling Women and, I hate to say, is considered lost. Ingram was first scheduled to direct another film, The Prisoner of Zenda, a tale of deceptions and ill-fated love affairs. His plan, therefore, was to find an actress he believed to be suitable for the lead in Trifling Women and test her acting abilities beforehand in a supporting role in The Prisoner of Zenda. Barbara was certain that she had done a terrible job when she auditioned for Ingram, but Ingram, a very selective man, disagreed. He cast her in both films. When the films were released in 1922, critics applauded Barbara's work as excellent and flawless. They declared her to be one of the screen's most beautiful women and an actress of exceptional ability. Trifling Women was particularly important for Barbara's career because it helped solidify her image as a distinct type of screen heroine, relatively new at the time, known as the vamp. The antithesis of the conventional virtuous heroine, vamps shamelessly use their feminine wiles to exert their will over men, and vamps were rather shocking figures in the early 1920s. The public wanted stars with sex appeal, and loads of it. Her great acting talent and versatility as an actress notwithstanding, Barbara enjoyed playing vamps in the early stages of her career, and she acknowledged Trifling Women as the film that made her. Barbara made 26 credited films, plus one uncredited, during her meteoric 5-year film acting career.
This book covers so much ground and so much fascinating territory, and you did so much incredible research and discovery into the life of Barbara. Was there, I don't know, a story or event or other piece of info that you uncovered that really surprised you or stuck out in some way?
Honestly, Barbara's life is so astonishing on multiple levels that I reached a point early on where amazingly nothing really surprised me anymore. Um, I can tell you what often surprised others back in the day. Obviously, the scandals she was involved with, as well as her serial relationships and marriages, were shocking to many. But people were often surprised to discover the discrepancy between the sensational headlines she generated, her oftentimes naughty screen persona, the demons that plagued her, ongoing serious alcoholism among them, and who she truly was as a person. Journalist Adela Rogers St. John's, a friend of Barbara's, stated after Barbara's death, "Judge her as you will. Admit her faults and weaknesses as I do. None of you could have known her and not loved her." Reporters and columnists, expecting Barbara to behave in person as some of her wicked screen characters would, were caught off guard when meeting her for the first time and encountering instead a woman they described as a charming, regular girl who radiates good fellowship. Barbara was well liked by directors, film crews, and her fellow actors. She insisted that artistic temperament is bunk. Director Fred Niblo said he'd never encountered anyone so pleasant to direct. And actress Alice Terry, Barbara's co-star in The Prisoner of Zenda, said that Barbara was as lovely in her personality as she was in her ravishing looks. She said Barbara was very big-hearted and generous and loved to please people. Her teenage rebelliousness aside, Barbara had an innate kindness and endearing sweetness about her. While conducting my research, I really enjoyed the accounts of her kind hearted acts. One of my favorites is Barbara once induced two producers to give an extra girl a screen test. She dressed the girl in a stunning outfit, took her to a party, and presented her as a famous New York stage actress. Barbara was also known to bring down on their luck artists into her beautiful Whitley Heights home to live with her until they got on their feet. She gave regularly and abundantly to family members, friends, and charities. She befriended the extras on her film sets. She'd get to know their names and talk and joke with them. And Rupert Hughes, who directed her in his film Souls for Sale, said, "There isn't a girl in the picture business who is kinder to all the extra girls than Barbara La Marr." He said she practically lets them help themselves from her wardrobe, and she does other equally kind things all the time. And Barbara's fame never went to her head. In fact, a friend of hers said that when Barbara was at the top, she was at her sweetest.
Speaking of all that research, all the deep dives into her life, how has all of that work impacted your performance as Barbara La Marr? Have you felt more connected to the actress since you've written the book?
Well, I'm very grateful that I was given the chance to author Barbara's biography in addition to portraying her. The interplay between the two enabled me to explore her through different lenses. It gave me greater insight into what made her tick. Portraying her allowed me to really consider and take on her thought processes. It allowed me to take on the beliefs, thoughts, and emotions that informed her behavior. And it ultimately helped me to understand her deepest longings and what made her who she was. The more I researched Barbara, the more similarities I discovered between us. As an actress seeking to find myself in the characters I portray, I begin by examining the similarities between myself and a given character. And as it turns out, Barbara and I have a great deal in common. We both discovered our passion for acting and writing at a young age. We were both raised by protective, sometimes overly protective parents. We were both rebellious, and we both ran away from home, albeit briefly, in our teens. She was 16, I was 15. Our temperaments are similar too. We've both been described as sensitive, kind, driven, hardworking, emotionally expressive, spiritual, and prone to sadness at times. And like Barbara, I've always been a dreamer, and I try to give the world the best of what's in me. I definitely feel more connected to her since I've written her biography. Beneath her frailties, her insecurities, her demons, and her life's tragic aspects, all of which I go into in detail in my book, she had an inherent strength that impelled her to keep fighting to achieve what she believed to be her destiny. No matter what she faced, she never stopped pursuing her dreams. She never stopped fighting, and never stopped fighting, as she said, to make something of myself, to give vent to this passion of expression, this pent up restless force that continually urges me on. And I often think of her whenever I feel discouraged for one reason or another. I remember how she kept going as best she could, and that inspires me.
As you know, Sherri, the sixth season of the Golden Silent Films podcast is dedicated to the centennial death of Rudolph Valentino, but he was not alone in passing away in 1926. As we talked about earlier, Barbara died on January 30th, 1926 herself. Much like the Latin lover's death 8 months later, her passing caused quite a stir. Her funeral was a sensational event marked by mobs, publicity, and crowds numbering in the 10,000s. Take us through that emotional farewell event.
I'll first back up a bit and explain what occurred in the months leading up to her passing. Barbara had suffered bouts of ill health at different times for years, and by 1925, her lungs were steadily weakening. Incessant alcohol abuse, a tendency to burn the candle at both ends, extreme dieting when wafer thin flappers became Hollywood's new feminine ideal, and overwork further undermined her health. Against her doctor's wishes, she'd insisted upon making her final film, The Girl from Montmartre. She was exhibiting signs of incipient pulmonary tuberculosis. That is, the potential was there for the disease to take hold. But she was intent on breaking free from her vamp typecasting and making a career comeback after a few box office flops. So she moved ahead with filming. She struggled to complete the film, and she barely completed it. She collapsed multiple times on the set, and then, after being carried from the set, unconscious and past weeping cast and crew members after collapsing for the final time, she was ordered by her doctor to go into seclusion to try to reclaim her health. At that point, the tuberculosis was developing in her and would soon become full blown and infectious. She left Los Angeles for Altadena, California, known at the time for its pristine air. She remained in Altadena in a little rented house for a few months before succumbing to pulmonary tuberculosis and nephritis at age 29 on January 30th, 1926. While Barbara was fighting to recover in Altadena, she often worried that people in the outside world had forgotten her. Before she died, she spoke of her wish to be returned to her public one last time. Her wish was granted. Barbara lay in state in a chapel in Los Angeles for 4 days before her funeral. Over 120,000 people, those who had known her personally and many, many others who had loved her from afar, came to pay their respects with tears and flowers, and a 12-year-old girl placed a red rose with an accompanying note in Barbara's hand. The note read in part, "To my beautiful lady, may my life be as lovely and unselfish as yours has been, and may you find eternal peace and love in the happy land." Barbara's father, deeply touched and considering it the ultimate tribute, decided to bury it with Barbara. An estimated 10,000 people swarmed the Los Angeles chapel on February 5th while Barbara's funeral was in progress. Police strained to contain the swelling crowd with barricades. Above them, people gathered on rooftops, faces peered down from upper story windows of nearby buildings, and boys and men clambered up light poles, signposts, and trees. Inside the chapel, a small, intimate group, consistent with Barbara's wishes, attended a simple but beautiful service. When the pallbearers carried Barbara's flower-strewn casket out of the chapel, it was met with near hysteria as a mob of people, desperate to touch it, broke through the barricades and charged toward it. Police, joined by civilians, fought for over half an hour to control the chaos, finally enabling the 7-vehicle funeral procession, shielded by patrol cars, to leave the area. Barbara was laid to rest at what is today known as Hollywood Forever Cemetery. As mentioned, it was Hollywood Cemetery at the time. She is interred in the cemetery's stately cathedral mausoleum, and the inscription on the front of her crypt reads, "With God in the joy and beauty of youth." Incidentally, Barbara's final film, The Girl from Montmartre, was released after her passing. The film's producers, fearful of the public's tendency in those days to avoid films featuring deceased stars, initially omitted her name from all billing. They promoted Louis Stone, her co-star, instead. But Barbara's fans, undeterred by her death, flocked to theaters to see the film, even breaking box office records in some areas. So Barbara's name was promptly reinstated in all the film's advertising. As Barbara had hoped, her performance was lauded by various critics, and she was commended for transcending her vamp sex symbol typecasting. One critic deemed her performance a last graceful gesture of adieu to a million filmgoers.
Now, since this podcast is built on positivity and the love of film and having a good time exploring unknown films, I would hate ending this interview on such a sad note. So let's perk things up a bit by discussing the legacy of Barbara La Marr and why her story is still so vital and important in this day and age.
Well, I would love to share what some of Barbara's peers had to say about her. After her passing, writer Willis Goldbeck, a friend of hers, eloquently stated, Barbara's weaknesses were all of the flesh. Her virtues were of the mind and spirit. We shan't see her like again. Writer Jim Tully said of Barbara, no woman has ever been able to walk across the screen with such golden allure. Homosexual film star William Haynes, romantically linked to Barbara in 1923, said, of all the screen sirens, I think she was the greatest. She was always so much the real woman. Ramon Navarro, a leading Latin lover of the silent screen and Barbara's close friend and co-star in 3 of her films, believed Barbara to be one of the screen's most gifted, brilliant artists. And many agreed with Ramon. In fact, Barbara similarly inspired stars among the succeeding generation of Hollywood's biggest stars, specifically Joan Crawford, Fay Wray, and Greta Garbo. Film producer and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer mogul Louis B. Mayer greatly admired Barbara as well. They made 4 films together in the 1920s. In the late 1930s, a decade after Barbara's passing, when Mayer discovered a stunning, intelligent, talented young actress named Hedwig Eva Maria Kiesler, he renamed her Hedy Lamarr in honor of Barbara. In 1960, Barbara was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her star is a lasting tribute to the artistic excellence with which she inspired her peers and millions of others. And I highly encourage listeners to view one or more of Barbara's surviving films. Unfortunately, as you know, not all silent films have survived, but thankfully, some of Barbara's most noteworthy film acting work has survived. In fact, 5 of her films may currently be viewed for free online. One is the classic adventure, The Three Musketeers, the 1921 box office mega hit featuring Barbara's breakout, critically acclaimed performance as the sinister spy, Milady de Winter, opposite gallant action hero Douglas Fairbanks Sr. The Nut is another one. As I said earlier, Douglas Fairbanks Sr. stars in this one too. He portrays a wacky inventor who, in his attempts to win a certain woman's affections, botches everything he undertakes. Barbara delivers a critically lauded, tempestuous performance as a fiery gangster's moll. The Prisoner of Zenda was hailed as a triumph when it was released in 1922. Barbara gives a highly praised, heartfelt performance as a cast-off woman who helps defeat a coup by betraying her deceitful lover. And Souls for Sale is an excellent film to watch if you'd like to get an idea of what filmmaking was like in the silent era. There's a wonderful, suspenseful, romantic story woven throughout the film. The film features a galaxy of silent film stars, and Barbara's character portrays a home-wrecking vamp on the screen, but really has a heart of gold. Lastly, The White Moth is another great film to see, though the last so many minutes of the film are missing and presumed lost. But Barbara plays the lead role of a famous dancer who finds true love. After this film's release in 1924, one critic raved that Barbara is scintillating as she has never scintillated before in the film. I have a tribute website, barbaralamar.net, and in addition to having so many photos and much information about Barbara on the site, I have a filmography page where I list the films Barbara wrote and appeared in. I note on that filmography page which of Barbara's films are currently known to have survived and where these surviving films may be viewed, and I provide links to the 5 films I just mentioned, the 5 films that may be viewed for free online. People can also Google these 5 films, and sometimes Turner Classic Movies plays some of them.
Thank you so much, Sherri, for taking your time to talk about your book and your knowledge about Barbara La Marr. It was an amazing experience learning about Barbara, while at the same time hearing your connection to the Silent Star. I really love how you are keeping her story alive for generations to come and in multiple different ways. Before we say our goodbyes, where can interested parties follow you to stay up to date with your performance schedule and learn more about your book, Barbara La Marr, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood?
My book was published by the University Press of Kentucky, so people can learn about it and purchase it on their website. Amazon also sells it. Other online retailers do as well. I believe the University Press of Kentucky lists some of these other retailers on my books page on their site. Again, I have a tribute website, barbaralamar.net, and I also have a tribute page on Facebook, Barbara La Marr, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood. As far as my performance schedule, a good number of the Barbara La Marr performances programs I do throughout the year are for private groups, but some are open to the public. I post information about my upcoming public performances and programs on the tribute site, in the blog section, and on the tribute Facebook page. On that note, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I sincerely appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share some of Barbara's story, and many thanks for all you do to keep this magical period in Hollywood's history and those who helped make it magical alive.
Again, it was lovely and incredible having you here, Sherri, and I think everyone listening really loved everything you had to say and probably learned quite a bit. So with this biographical tome of a podcast coming to a close, we want to thank you for spending your valuable podcast listening time with us. It's been incredibly fun to dig into the life of Barbara La Marr with Sherri Snyder herself. There are so many more amazing stories and details in the book, and we've only scratched the surface here, so you definitely need to pick up a copy yourself and really dive into the life of Barbara La Marr. Speaking of Sherri Snyder, though, this episode wouldn't have been possible without her commitment to keeping Barbara's story alive. She took a story almost lost to time and brought it back to life. What a fantastic read Barbara La Marr, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood was. It was such a great surprise to find myself so enveloped in the story of this amazing actress. Now, did you enjoy this legendary life story? What are your favorite Barbara La Marr films? For everyone who's read this book, how awesome was it? What were your favorite parts? Who should be featured in the next gathering of the Golden Silent Films Podcast Book Club? Tell us your story. Let us know all those details at the various social media spots of the Golden Silent Films Podcast. On that note, if you have forgotten, we're on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Twitter. Let us know what you think of this episode. What silent and silent-related movies, past or present, do you want us to look at next? Our world of silent movie knowledge and experience is constantly expanding, and we need your input for our future episodes here and beyond. Again, if you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or any other podcast outlet that allows it, subscribe, rate, review. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment, hit that notification bell. It does a lot for our visibility, and we love hearing your thoughts and ideas. We are at 73 subscribers on YouTube. We missed our 100 goal for 2025, but we're still pushing to hit hard that goal of 100. So please subscribe and spread the word so other cool folks can subscribe as well. We really, really appreciate all of your incredible support, and seeing how much you find folks out there are listening on all of our many platforms only makes us want to make the best show possible. So, with all of that being said, thank you to all of you fine listeners for all of your fine listening, and thank you to Sherri Snyder for joining us. And don't forget, the silents are golden, and the talkies are just a fad. and read Barbara La Marr, The Girl Who Was Too Beautiful for Hollywood.